Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Craig Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uwayama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, March 28th, and we have a mailbag show. Put out the bat signal for the ISD customers. They came through with some excellent questions today. I'm very excited about the questions today, Jamie. I thought everyone did a great job. So we're going to be talking about that and whatever comes up in the chat. So if this is your first time catching us, please hit the like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell so whenever it is we are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. And off the top of the show, I want to give a hearty hit and hustle congratulations to our guy Robert Halicki. Got promoted at work. He's a new clinical exercise physiologist coordinator for the cardiac rehab program at TRMC. I don't know what TRMC means, but that sounds all very professional. Got to go to school for that. It sounds like, Jamie. So good job by Robert. That's good stuff. We're all very excited for that. And this segue is brought to you by Robert. If you're a newly promoted exercise physiologist and you want to look up some scrubs to get some new bamboo scrubs or bamboo shirt to wear under your scrubs to keep you cool while you're at work, then you can head over to esqclothing.com, which is founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2024. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Sports Daily and get 10% off your entire purchase. So congratulations again to Robert. That's good stuff. Good job by you. Jamie, how are you? You just came from the X-rays. Do you know what it looks like? Do they give you an update, or they still got to check them out? What's the situation there?
Well, I got to go back in 3 weeks, so there's that part of it. But so far so good. Just
yeah.
Of course, I waited in the waiting room for over an hour, and then went in, and it took 10 minutes. So that's how it always is. And but everything they said, everything looks good. The only reason I would ever have to get surgery is if I wanted it to cosmetics, because I'm gonna have my collarbone kind of popping.
Yeah, it pops out.
But whatever, I don't care. I mean, whatever. Who am I?
Yeah, that'll get better over time. That happened to me. My collarbone on my left side when I was in high school, it was very pronounced, sticking out. But it's kind of gone away over time, so that'll go away for you. But I think it's good, to keep it up, right? Let people know, hey man, I got messed up playing hockey, but I'm playing through it. I'm a tough guy, right? So that's good stuff. Guy Takfiri on Twitter wants to know: do we expect Jamie back for fall camp? What's the prognosis? What's your?
If I would,
when are you back playing hockey? Let's ask.
When am I back playing hockey? I mean, I don't play summer hockey anyway, so I wouldn't be playing anytime soon. But it starts up again in September.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And I mean, I should be back then. I should be good to go by then. Right. And playing just my wife, I know for those who don't know, my wife is a physiotherapist. So not just because she's running my show and telling me when I can play or whatever, she said that it'll probably be, a few months before I'm back, but I mean, I'm not going to play for a few months anyway, so it'll be all good.
Yeah. Rajon wants to know, given time, we've had another little bit more time to think about it. How do you think Riley Leonard's ankle affects things? Have you changed how you thought about it? Have you given it more thought since our last comments? Anything on that? Or he's asking if there's any scuttlebutt about it.
I don't think there's any real scuttlebutt. I think that the thing is that I kind of feel the same. It's just that Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not good that he's had to get it redone again. But I think kind of what we were talking about with Ben Morrison, and certainly like with all the other guys that Marcus Freeman was asked about whether or not like when these guys might be back, and he was purposely non-committal on every single guy and being like, I don't want to say when these guys will be back or whatever. And that's obviously something that the Notre Dame, medical and training staff that they want out there because they don't want to put a timeline on things.
Yeah.
So, but the fact that he said that, he could come back for the end of spring, that just makes me think it's nothing to worry about, really. Like,
Yeah.
he'd be back for the end of spring. So, and I think it's the most important thing is like, if it's going to help him to be at full speed in week one, then that's what matters. That's what matters. And I still like, I mean, it's crazy to me how like how many people just like completely. There's just a lot of people out there who were like just really do not like Riley Leonard as a player, not as a person, whatever, but as a player, who were just like they just do not. I think they're kind of impacted by what happened with Hartman last year.
100%. That's 100%. That's true. And I guess that's natural and fair. I don't know.
Yeah, part of that's fair, but also I just think they're two different guys. And
Right.
I also just think too, like, I think the other thing is, I think people think like last year that, Hartman would have 100% got benched if he wasn't getting all this NIL money. And I just don't think that was the case. I think he was probably going to play anyways. Like, it wasn't an obvious choice to just be like, they really need to go to Angeli. Like, that wasn't, no one was calling for that.
Yeah.
No one was calling for that. And this year, if there is something there too, I think there could be people calling for that. And if that's the case, then so be it. But I just think that, like, Riley Leonard's a good player, even if he's just the exact same player he was at Duke. He's still a good player, and he can, and whether or not these other guys, the other quarterbacks, could be better than him, we'll see. But now we actually get a chance to see, because they'll have these reps that they wouldn't have got otherwise.
Yeah. As far as the ankle, the only thing I'm concerned about is, this is 2 operations now in a short amount of time, 3 months, and you had something happen when the injury they did an operation when the original injury happened, right? Like, he tried to play through it, which in hindsight is probably a pretty bad idea. He tried to play through it. He had an operation done, then had another operation done, and then has had another one. So I kind of want to know what's going on with the ankle. We're not going to know. So that's the only thing that I'm kind of just monitoring, right? Is just like, hey, like, is he as mobile as he has been? It's a pretty big part of his appeal, right? I think the way that I think about him and the way that I think about the offense is a little bit different, because I think the surrounding pieces are so much more in place and they're so much better, in my opinion. Like, people talk about Sam Hartman. I think if Sam Hartman was the quarterback of this team, especially with Mike Denbrock around, I think this would be a much better situation for Sam Hartman, the quarterback. So I think that the entire offensive situation now is advantageous for whoever plays quarterback, much more so than it was last year. So that's kind of how I view just the offense as a whole. But for Hartman himself, for Leonard himself, the only thing I question is, where is he at with the ankle? How is that ankle going to be long term? Kind of that's my biggest question there. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Good question to start off. Let's get to the ISD customer questions, because we got some good ones. From Iris Bronx, the first one: what's the one opponent you would like to see on Notre Dame's schedule? I guess in the near future that isn't planned. Who would you like to see, Jamie?
I think it's one of those things where it's just like it's fun to pick like one of those traditional blue blood games where it's like this is a big game. So it's just one of those things where you like kind of circle it on the calendar when they're playing Ohio State, or they're playing A&M this year.
Mhm.
They have Alabama coming up. Like, I mean, it's a ways away, but still, like they have that on the schedule. Like, so there's those kind of things. No one really jumped out at me as like a one that I would want to kind of see them play, that they haven't played, because they have played. They played Texas. They played.
Yeah.
They played Alabama. They played. They get to play Clemson and Florida State. You know, a decent amount. And really, like, I guess Penn State would be something, just because I think, like, those are just, it's two, very story programs that, and I think when they played last time, like, it wasn't really like both programs that were like kind of where they're at now. They're both in better places now.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that would be interesting. And I just think that they haven't played kind of Penn State enough, really, out of like those kind of traditional schools. So yeah, I mean, Penn State is really the only one that I could think of off the top of my head. Yeah, because I do think it would be pretty cool for them to get Oregon on the schedule to visit
Yeah.
Autzen. Like that would be, I mean, obviously that's a tough place to play, but it's just one of those things. It's like, I don't even know if Notre Dame's ever played Oregon
Yeah.
in the history. Like I not that I can remember. So, and now obviously Oregon's a much different program than they were like 20
Mhm.
years ago. Right. So, I think that would be pretty cool.
I think that every time this question comes up, I think of Oregon every single time. I think a home and home with Oregon would be really fun. I don't think they've ever played Oregon. I can't ever remember a situation where they have, but it just like they are to me. Oregon is like college football. Like Autzen is such a college town. Like it just or like a
Or
college stadium. Like
Eugene, yeah.
yeah, Eugene is a college town. Autzen Stadium is like an Oregon type of. Just like it's just the essence of what college football is. It's a kind of out in the middle of nowhere, right? Kind of like Notre Dame is, in a way, right? Like it's not like there's a bunch of stuff going around South Bend. Same thing. Like there's not a ton of stuff going on around Eugene, right? I mean, to me, there's a kind of a Tracktown USA feel to it, just because track and field is such a huge thing out there. But with Nike and everything, I just think getting a home and home, getting those fan bases together would be really fun. Rajon mentions Florida. I think Florida's fun. Like I don't know that Notre Dame's ever played in the swamp, right? So like a home and home against Florida would be really fun. So just kind of get those classic stadiums involved, right? Get Autzen involved, get the swamp involved, right? Like that would be really fun. I like that Notre Dame's going to Kyle Field this year. That's one of the things about Texas A&M. Get Notre Dame to Kyle Field. Last time they played, I think, was 2001, right? With or wait, 2001. When did they go to Texas A&M? It was after. It was. I know it was during Bob Davie, right? It wasn't 99.
Gosh, it was around. It was
Because I know
it might have been
they played home in
2001.
2000. So they opened with Nebraska in 2001. So it would be weird to go to Nebraska, then go to Kyle Field. But it wasn't 99 because it was Kansas. It wasn't. Someone help me when they went to Kyle Field. It was not a good game. They played very poorly. But it's 1976 Notre Dame 41 Oregon 0. So it's been a long time since Notre Dame's. Thank you for looking that up, Rajon. So it's been a long time since Notre Dame played Oregon. Let's get that going again. That's kind of my answer to this every single time. Next question from Irish Bronx. Again, he gave us 3 in a row. So we're going to get a lot from Irish Bronx today. Jamie, who was your comp for, I think Jeremiyah Love is who he's talking about. Would you stick with it or would you change it at this point?
My comp for him was CJ Procise, and I think don't see any reason to change it.
Seems
I
to
feel
make
pretty,
sense.
I feel pretty even kind of better about it because, they're try to work him at receiver as well and trying to get him some reps there and trying to get him, uh, as possibly work him in the slot a little bit. And I think that that's CJ Procise, right? Like that
Yeah.
is, I think, in terms of just being like explosive speed too, they are very similar. I think that obviously Love has to kind of, by the time Procise left, he was a big guy. And I think Love obviously has to, physically develop a little bit more to have that exact thing. But I just think about like the receiving skills, the ability to kind of like the good feet on a kind of like a taller back and just that explosiveness, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think I feel pretty good about it. I mean, I just wrote about it in 6 thoughts too,
Yeah.
that's like, it just makes sense. Like and obviously that's a guy that Mike Denbrock was obviously very familiar with too.
Mm-hmm. I've heard a couple Ricky Waters takes on him as well, and that would fit. Again, Ricky Waters played wide
Yes,
receiver
very
for years,
similar. Yeah.
right? So I think both of those kind of have worked out. I think people had a good read on him. And we're going to stick with Jeremiyah Love on the next question from Irish Bronx because this is interesting. Who has more yards from scrimmage in 2024, Love or Jadarian Price?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I had a late night last night. Yeah, it's been this kind of sleeping with a sling on, not the greatest.
It's not what you want. It's not what
No,
you want to go for.
it's not the most comfortable.
Yeah.
I will say that this is one of those ones. It's just like, man, it feels so impossible to guess this right now. Like I almost want to say like ask us again in fall camp to kind of get a better idea of where everything is. But just like I don't even know who I would pick right now, but I would guess it's going to be pretty close. Like I think if you're thinking of like, um, I'm thinking just in terms of a split, I'm thinking more Diggs, Estime, in 2022 in terms of like pretty even amount of touches for both players. Obviously,
Yeah.
they're different players than those two, but I'm just saying in terms of like, kind of like splitting up touches. I think that's probably what I see. So, and it'll probably just depend on like health and all that too, right? And whether or not these guys can stay healthy. But and I think Price too, he can catch the ball well. So I think that's the one thing is that both these guys have ability where they can, gain yards, not just from running the ball and just
Yeah.
from just touches in general.
So Price was their screen back last year. They ran screens to him all the time. Love is in the slot. He's working in the slot. So that's kind of like more we're using you in the actual passing game. And so that's the a kind of a wrinkle there. I do want to ask you, what do you think about him working in the slot? Like taking slot reps, like during practice, you're working as a slot receiver. What do you think about that?
I love it because I think like I mean it's not to say that Notre Dame doesn't have plenty of options there at receiver who could play in the slot or just like plenty of options at receiver in general, but I think if I was just going to say like who are the top 5 skill players on Notre Dame's team this year, I would say that Jeremiyah Love and JD Price are both in the top 5.
Yeah.
So if you want to be able to get these guys as many touches as possible, I think arguably like 2 of the fastest, 2 of the most explosive, 2 of the guys that could like kind of break a game open. So I just from that perspective, I just love it. I just think that's like a good move to go that route. And it's not that I expect him to be like a full-time slot or anything like that. I just expect like, oh, now we're gonna get to see a different kind of like 21 personnel, where
Yeah.
we're like, oh, like he can actually line up out there and win. And also too, that's just the kind of thing that for his future too, if he can go and show that he can have that kind of value, that's how you just become like, Jahmyr Gibbs or whatever.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
like to a different level where you're looked at by the NFL in a different light. Because if you can do that, and you can do the stuff that like Gibbs and McCaffrey and some of these other guys can do as like pass catchers and route runners. I mean, Kyron Williams, obviously, sorry to not acknowledge the Notre Dame guy in it too, but like it's just so valuable.
Well, I mean, you're in 21 personnel, but you're kind of in 11, right? If he's a viable, but you can also go back to 21, right? So you can be very versatile in with your personnel, right? It's very hard for teams to kind of plan how they want to how they defend you, what kind of personnel they want to have out there, right? Like, who are we going to stay in nickel? Like, if they're in 21, let's just say you have, I'm just throwing an example. Let's say you have Great House, Jaden Thomas, Eli Raridan, and then you have Price and Love in the backfield, right? Well, you can run out of that. I mean, that's basically that. If Notre Dame was in I formation, that's 21 personnel. Okay. But if you split out Love and now he's like a slot receiver, well, now you're an 11. Maybe I want a nickel out there, like, so it makes it hard for teams. It could make it hard, schematically. It could make them have to make a decision whether we want to play heavy or we want to in our base or we want to get a nickel. And if you are in base, well, then maybe we can throw out of this. If you are in nickel, maybe we can run at you now. So it allows Notre Dame to do a lot of things. So having that versatility is always a good thing for an offensive coordinator. Drew Brennan asks, would you trade Notre Dame's 2024 defense, projected and healthy, for Michigan's 2023 defense?
I mean, I'd probably take Michigan's defense. People are going to hate that answer, but it's just
I don't like being put in this position. For
just being honest, like I probably would take it just because, right as of this moment, there's
where does that defense have an advantage over the projected 2024
depth right now, right? Because you look at like the number of guys that are, going to play in the league right now that are going to be drafted from the thing. Well, I mean, don't blame me. Blame Drew for asking this dumb question. Come on, Drew. But no, but I mean, it's just honest, right? Like, it's just if you take off like the Michigan uniform and all that, or you just forget it's Michigan, and you're just talking about just straight up like what they have there. They have, on paper, it's a better defense than Notre Dame's. It's not to say that Notre Dame's couldn't be better, because we don't know that. Like, I don't know that Christian Gray won't be like dominant this year or whatever, and all these other things. But it's like, we still got to see. There's still questions about the linebackers. I mean, we know the answers to what they Michigan had at linebacker. We know the answers that they had at all three levels, right? So it's like, you would take it just like anything. It's like you're comparing something that is hypothetical, comparing to, where, if so, the better question would be, 2023 Michigan versus 2023 Notre Dame. And I would say that's like, you'd lean Michigan, but it's close to a toss up. The problem is that, that Michigan team, is just deeper, and that's kind of what it is. I mean, they should be deeper too, because that's like year whatever for Harbaugh, and they had all these guys come back for 5th, 6 years, and they had all these kind of pieces that they're together that helped them get on that run, and it's a different situation than what Marcus Freeman inherited.
Yeah. Jason Smith says proven versus potential. I mean, you're asking, we know they are a national championship caliber defense because they won a national championship. I would say the questions that I would have is that Michigan had this guy. I think his name is Mike Sandstro. His last name is definitely Sandstro. He is a guy who, he wasn't a safety. He was like a nickel. Like, he was their kind of nickel guy. and he's kind of playing the position of Jordan Clark. He was very good. Like he was a huge key to what
Unbelievable.
they
Like
did. He like
you
a
would
very
not
good
take
player.
Jordan Clark on paper over him. You would not take
Right,
Thomas
right. Like
Harper. You
you
wouldn't even take
can't.
Tariq Bracy as good as Tariq Bracy. You just wouldn't, right? So
Right.
it's like,
It's very difficult to do that. The question is like, so how much how much can Jordan Clark mitigate that? How good is Rod Hurd? Right.
yeah.
That's a question we don't really have. How good is Boubacar Traore going to be? How good can Jordan Botelho be?
How good
How
is
good
Adon
can
Schuler, right? Like
right?
all of
Exactly.
these kind of
Right.
questions, right? So that's what it is. And I know whatever. I'm sure there's other Notre Dame podcasts that would just hype it up and just be like, 100% Kool-Aid drinking, whatever. But it's just one of those things where you're just like asking. It's kind of like the Riley Leonard to Steve Angeli thing, where like people like whatever. There's a guy in Java who's a long time but good poster on ISD who was like arguing with me about like Steve Angeli and about his like numbers compared to Riley Leonard's. Well, like, I mean, he did it against garbage time and then against like a depleted Oregon State defense, right? That's different than what Riley Leonard did, right? Like it's and also there's the
Yeah.
running element and all this kind of stuff, right? It's like the thing is that Riley Leonard is more known than Steve Angeli, and so you're always going to lean towards the known, unless the unknown is just the talent is just so much better, and I can't say that at this time that I know for sure, but I am very excited about Notre Dame's 2024 defense. And as Rajon asks, the question is, can ND be as good this year? Yeah, I think they can. It's
Yeah.
possible. They could be a top 5 defense this year.
Yeah.
They could be a top 5 defense, and I truly believe that. So,
Yeah.
we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Neil M. In terms of this is a very good question. All right. In terms of body fat percentage, Emil Wagner is at the low end of the scale for O line. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that he is 285 pounds, basically halfway between 281 and 290 that he said. So if we were to add 15 pounds of fat and look less than look less lean and more like a traditional O-line, would Emil Wagner being 300 pounds then be a good thing and a posted weight you get excited to see? So basically he's asking if let's is it would be very hard for Emil Wagner to add like the weight that we want him to add. It would be very hard for that to be muscle, right? Like he's got to put on some fat, right? He just does. That's the nature of this. So, let's say he's at 285. Let's say he gets to 310, right? And that's mostly fat, right? You got to put on some fat. That's what he's going to eat and all that stuff. Is that a good thing? Is that, I mean, that's the kind of the question, right? Is gaining weight, and then would that be a good thing? Would that kind of be a good thing for his prospects, or would it be kind of like maybe you don't want to put on that much fat? What do you think about this?
I don't think you want to put on like I mean, I don't think you want to put on 15 pounds of straight fat. I mean, I don't.
Well, do you agree? Like it would be hard to add that much muscle, right? Like it kind of
Oh
would.
yeah. It would be hard to add just like at least like lean muscle, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is, so he, I mean, it's crazy because there was the hubbub of like, I mean, and fair enough, because people saw 281 and everybody freaked out. And then all of a sudden they asked him, they're like, oh, he's over 290. So it was
Right.
like, well, okay, well, that sounds better, right? And I don't think that, being 293, let's just guess 293. I don't think being 293 and 308, if it's bad weight, I don't think it's that much of a difference. I think it really comes down to just how he plays and how he carries that weight and how he uses that weight. And if it's like, if one of the things with the weight is that he doesn't have the power to move, people off the ball, then that's a different story, right?
Yeah.
That's a different story. So I think it's a lot more about how he plays and how he carries it and all that too. I mean, obviously, when you get to the NFL, like it's a different story because you're looking at guys that are like really like two guys that are twitchy, that are 235, 240 edges in college, they're like the same level of twitch, but like 265, 270 in the NFL. Some of these guys are like 290, right? So it's like, well, that's why it's a different game, but he's not playing that game. He's playing in college. And so it's where he projects as an NFL player, or, to be an NFL player, that's a kind of like a different story. But where he projects to play, I mean, he can play at like, I mentioned before, like Robert Hainsey was like, one of those guys who probably put like, bags of coins in his pocket to get over 300 when he was early on.
Yeah.
And, he was like, a 290-ish guy, and he was fine. Like, I think that's kind of what matters more. And I mean, the perfect example, and it's the guy who physically probably has that same kind of like lean mass too, is Tyron Smith. Obviously the great, he's with the Jets now. He was at USC. He was at with the Dallas Cowboys. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, left tackle. I mean, that guy he was not built like a traditional guy. Like the difference between him and Jonathan Ogden, it's like they're not even the same type of player at all in terms of just how they're built. But it's how he carried and played with that weight and whatever. Like I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't keep track of. I wasn't like following Tyron Smith's weight, his whole career in Dallas. But I promise you, when he was in college, he was like not a big dude. Like he might have even been a guy who played at 280 in college.
Yeah. So Rayjon's asking if the 280 thing one was a mistake. I don't know if it was a mistake or whatever. It doesn't seem to be reality at this point. If he is 292, he could get to 300. That is correct. 100%. Next question. ND Matt 01. If you were coach for a day, what position change would you like to try just to see how it would work out? This is just for fun, with the understanding you are not advocating. So I don't think there's anyone where it's like, we're definitely going to advocate for this player, switching positions. It's just for this exercise. Who do you think about could be a good candidate for this?
Yeah, so this is the Kyle Hamilton to receiver question.
This is the Kyle Hamilton to receiver, which should have happened. I do advocate for that.
Yeah, I think that first of all, this is a fun question. Love these kind of questions. These are great questions, Andy, Matt. I mean, I would say, okay, Evan Schneider mentions, Clarence Lewis to safety. I would just say that, like, I think we've kind of advocated for that before. So I'm all for that. I'm all for that. Although now, with a little bit of uncertainty about when Benjamin Morrison's going to be ready, you do like to have that option. So, I mean, he can obviously still play corner and in a pinch anytime, right? But you still want to have a guy there. I don't know. I think you would just, like, in terms of just like fun factor, I just like KVA goal line fullback. Like, just, I want to see this guy, some isolation blocks, running into people and just lighting them up. I just think that would be really fun. And so in terms of the fun factor, that would be my pick for the fun factor. But I mean, certainly like the Clarence Lewis, like, to safety thing is something that I've kind of always thought about. But there is one thing that I would say, because even though I've advocated for it, Clarence Lewis, just him having the kind of like speed to get downhill in the alley and fill and like consistently make those kind of tackles that like Xavier Watts has had to make. I'm not sure about that part of it. So, but still would like to just at least see it in a hypothetical terms. Yeah.
I think you could go all linebacker, like goal line backfield, right? You could have KVA, you could have Drake Bowen, who's a very good offensive offensive player. You could have Jalen Sneed do it. You could have Jack Kaiser be the quarterback, who's the quarterback of his high school team. Like you could really go like ham on this stuff. Because I was thinking about Drake Bowen as a short yardage guy as well. So that's a good call on KVA. The really good athletes they have at linebacker. I mean, really, like
Drake Bowen would be another really good goal line fullback.
Yeah, I mean, you could like Preston Zinter. You could put him at tight end, right? Like he played tight end. I played wide receiver. I think in high school, like he was a good athlete there. Very good athletes at the linebacker position. Another one going from offense to defense. Interesting, Jaden Harrison slot guy, right? He is very well built. He has very strong legs. He has he's quick. Obviously, he's very fast. He's a returner as well. So he has that kind of, when you're a returner, you do have a bit of a tough temperament, especially if you're returning punts, things of that nature. So I'd like to see him in the slot. It's just kind of like wreaking havoc, send him on blitzes, being able to cover. I think that would be a good type of situation. I think Greathouse at safety could work. Very sturdy player, very physically built, kind of along the lines of a Don Schuler. I think he could hold up really well there. So that's kind of how I feel about that situation. Please.
I just want to add into really just loved the 1993 team, Jeff Burris in the backfield, in those goal line short yardage situations. When they were going full house backfield, giving them the football, loved it. Jeff Burris, growing up, maybe my favorite, Notre Dame player, partially because of that, because it was like, oh, he's like all-American safety, and he gets to score touchdowns and run the football here too. I always thought that was great, and I can't remember which. Apologies because I'm old now and I can't remember which version of college football it was, but there was the one version where you could go back and play like the classic teams of certain whatever, and you could play with that 93 Notre Dame team, and Burris, you run it, and I would give it to Burris. I would not just in goal line situations. I'd be like, all right, Jeff, now's your chance to shine here, Jeff. You're gonna go for 100 in this game.
Yeah. Fun fact: Jeff Burris led the '93 team in rushing touchdowns. That's a fun fact for
Love
everyone. It. Yes. What do you know? You put your best players and play them both ways, and it works out for you. What do you know? And that was during a time when like they had a ton of good running backs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like they had so many good players that could actually do it, but they played the best guy because he could get it done. Would love to see that. And by the way, if and when Dallas Golden ever commits to Notre Dame program and enrolls at Notre Dame, I will be advocating incessantly for him to play both ways because he has the ability to do it. And you got to take advantage of your best players. You got to take advantage of your best guys, your versatile guys, and you got to take advantage of opportunities to upgrade your roster, to upgrade your offense and defense, and to upgrade your website or your social media page for your small business. And you can do so by visiting vsrmediacompany.com, which is founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. On to our next question. Duke Sinatra. A lot of questions from Duke, but these are great questions, so we appreciate that. All right, Duke says, first, Rudolph stated that Kugan's main focus this winter-spring was gaining strength. If he is able to do so, would that fix the most of his problems from last year? Or were athletic ability and mental technique mistakes also a big part of his issues? What do you think of that?
I think it's I wouldn't say he wasn't a guy who made a lot of mental mistakes. I think that was one of the things too, right? Like he's a smart player.
Yes.
you didn't see him, and that's one of the reasons you start every game, right? That's one of the reasons you're put in that position. So I think too the kind of comparison for him. Certainly, he's a little bit bigger than him, but like it's kind of Trevor Ruland, where some of the things is like, Ruland wasn't, tough as nails, a guy who got after it. Kugan, you can put a highlight together of Kugan's like best run blocks last year, and it looks good. Like I'll tell you that. But there's also plays too where you're like, well, he got overwhelmed because this guy's like longer, twitchier than him. So that's part of it. So some of it is like, some of it he needs to get stronger. He needs to be better. Everyone can always get better technically, right? Like that's always something. But I think with some guys, because if you're not Quentin Nelson and you're not like, man, this guy's like just a monster and he's like kind of a freak athlete at that size too and all that. Like if you're not that, it's like it just causes you to be more perfect in every way in terms of like how your technique has to be and how strong you have to be and all that kind of stuff. And it's like there's just not many guys who can kind of get away with it. And it's not to say that he won't be able to do it, but it's like it's why you don't see many others like Jason Kelsey. It's like he's a 280-pound center. It's like, how's this guy? He's blocking, 330-pound nose guards, but you're like, he's doing it, right? So it's just some guys, are just at a different level there. And I don't know if Kugan will ever get to that level, but I think he's kind of got to get closer to that because he's just never going to be, he's never going to be Billy Schrauth. Billy Schrauth has more physical tools than Kugan.
To the next question is Kugan. Do you think Kugan's better suited for center?
Possibly. That's certainly where he worked, before, right? That was, where he worked his first couple years on campus. I think that's true, but also, is he a better center than Ashton Craig? Right. And would he be a better center than Ashton Craig? That's kind of where the question leads to from there. Right.
Right. So the next question is, if Kugan or Otting prove they can start at center, could you see Ashton Craig being a top level guard? So does Ashton Craig have position flexibility, do you think?
I think he's got some, but I don't know. It's one of these things where it's like, it's kind of dangerous because you're like, let's just say Ashton Craig is just great all spring. And they're like, man, we're so happy with him. This guy's going to be our center for like the next 3 years, right? That's how they view him. And then maybe you say, okay, maybe he is the best option at guard, but maybe you don't want to mess with that of just being like, what you kind of have. And I think that's one of the reasons why with Jarrett Patterson too, was like, I think especially that in 2021, I think that's one of the reasons they didn't want to move him, because they were like, we know we're going to get this out of him.
Yeah.
There. Right. And I honestly think too, if they felt better about the guards in 2022, they would have just kept him at center. Obviously he's he's center in the NFL. So it's kind of it's a hard thing to say of like, maybe it's possible then he could be really good. Certainly, I think Nick Martin could have played guard, right? Like he could have played guard. I think he was probably the right fit at center, but he could have played guard and started at guard. I think that Robert Hainsey is a guy who could have started at every spot on the offensive line. He was playing center in the NFL, right? And there's certainly some guys like that. Zach Martin could have played all over the line. All over the line, right? But there just aren't that many guys that can do that. And it's a lot mentally too, to have to be able to say like, okay, well now you got a master guard now too. And maybe you don't want to do that with Craig yet.
Yeah.
To say like Craig, because if he's just kind of getting comfortable and doing well there. So I mean, that's kind of what it's got to be about. And I take it for what it's worth, because I don't take the who's running out with the ones and twos right now to be too much when you see like Matt kind of list the of who's with the ones and twos at the beginning of those 5 minute periods of when they're just kind of lining up, because sometimes they, depending on the day, they could just switch it up or whatever. But like Sam Pendleton was like the second team center the other day. So I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, Sam Pendleton, maybe he's a guard, maybe he could be a center. Like, I don't know. To me, it's just like there's a lot of unknowns. Although I will say, kind of building on what we were talking about with Wagner and Baker in the last episode, that I mean, I heard like Craig and Shrouth are both having good springs, so that's encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's very good to hear. Any positive comments like that about the O-line is very good. Next question: if Greg is monitoring the practice hype about Jaden Harrison, at what point will he start monitoring the relative lack of practice hype so far at least about Chris Mitchell? First of all, I have no concerns about him at this moment, and the reason for that is the hype around Jaden Harrison is how he's moving around, basically, which is relative maybe to expectations. I think when he was added to the roster, I think people thought, oh, this is just going to be a return guy. Where does he kind of fit? Like Jordan Faison, like he's there, and Jaden Greathouse is a slot guy, and they like Jaden Thomas in the slot. Like, where does he fit? Right. I don't think that the media has seen any sort of team stuff beyond the first day, and the first day is not going to show a ton because they're not in pads and things of that nature. And Chris Mitchell isn't the type of player who is going to physically look good because he's very slight. And he's just not a physically impressive type of person. So that doesn't really concern me. Now, I think that one thing we learned from the last couple of years is, if we start to hear in practice, like X guy is not making plays, he's not out there doing things right. I think we do need to take heed of that, right? That just like, hey, if it's not happening, it's not happening. I'm not gonna overreact to really anything. I mean, even like Jaden Harrison stuff. Like, yeah, he looks good, great. Like it's got to happen in the fall for me. When people start seeing stuff happen in the fall, we start getting reports like, hey, this guy looks really good in the fall. Then okay, I'm gonna start to take a good bit of notice of that. But yeah, for right now in the spring, it would have to be. You'd have to hear some things like we heard about Caleb Smith, the transfer last year.
Yeah, it's like I've not heard anything like that.
He can't get open against Ryan Barnes. It's like, well, that's not great, right? Like he's running with the threes. Like we're not hearing that stuff. So that's kind of the important thing. Did you have something on this?
Yeah. I think everything I've heard is that they think Chris Mitchell's good. Like that's not something that I would get too worried about in terms of like you not hearing hype stuff about practice sports, especially because as of right now, they only had the one full practice. It was the first day without pads. So, and then they're doing these 5-minute, periods, or the 5-period thing right now. And, it's just like, you can even say into like, look at it where QB3 was QB1 in the last practice. So there's just like, I mean, that kind of stuff has an impact on all that kind of stuff too, right? So, and also too, like, let's not forget too, as it's something to remember that like, if someone's like, oh man, this guy's cooking, this guy's doing great. It's like, well, just also remember that Ben Morrison isn't practicing right now. So it's like, because it's also one thing to be like, okay, well, he beat Jade Mickey, or he beat Chance Tucker, or he beat Christian Gray, or whoever, right? Like, and it's another thing to be like, wow, I mean, it's been a while since we've seen Benjamin Morrison get cooked in practice. Like, that's that's something I think that would be worth reacting to.
Yeah. So it's just we'll need to monitor both ways. It's fine. I think everything's as it should be at the moment. So that's something to keep in mind. Jamie, what players or position groups are you most excited to view when you attend practice?
I mean, definitely. Uh, I mean, the receivers. That's definitely like I might have my eyes on the receivers. I'm interested to see Harrison and Mitchell, and you know, Micah Gilbert and Cam Limbs. All these guys. Like I'm very interested to kind of see where those guys are at. I'm really interested in Adon Schuler. Like Adon Schuler looks like $1,000,000. He looks
100%.
great. He looks great. And I know it was just like a one practice clip that we just saw from if you look at ISD's last video of the practice clips, whatever. But Adon Schuler just coming downhill, and it was a nothing play, right? It was just him coming downhill and filling that like in against the run. But you're just like, oh my gosh, because he's so big and so long. And so, yeah, that's just he's on my list of defensive players that I definitely am excited to watch. You know, Rajon mentioned KVA and Bryce Young. Those two guys, like where are they at? Because those are the two freshmen on defense that I think have probably the best shot at playing early, right? So that's definitely something. And I mean, I would say as well, just the quarterbacks, I think, is always just because now, I mean, it always was going to be interesting to see like where's Riley Leonard at and all that kind of stuff. But now it's just like it just becomes so much more intriguing because all of a sudden, like, I bet there would have been like all these questions were like, I mean, so people just ask, how's CJ Carr doing? I mean, he didn't really get any reps. Like that would be the answer.
Yeah.
If this was a year ago. Same kind of because that was the kind of thing with Kenny Minchie. I got like 3 reps in team against the third team and didn't really see much. That's kind of what and the same thing with Steve Angeli. Well, now, you know, they are going to get reps there. So now you're going to get to kind of see stuff. So, I mean, if like it's just something where you're like, man, Kenny Minchie is just lights out here, then that is like can be something that would be like fun to see if that could happen or whatever. Or I mean, just not to kind of put it down on it, but just like if it's the opposite and you're like, oh, he's talented and he makes these great throws, but you're like, oh, you see this other stuff where you're like, yeah, he's not ready yet or whatever, and all this kind of stuff, right? So, but yeah, definitely those quarterbacks. I'm excited to see them.
Yeah, everyone wants to see the quarterbacks. All right, SGM59. There's been multiple national reporters hinting at post-practice spring or post-spring transfer portal that will be wild and a shock to the system. Has there been any smoke on this impacting Notre Dame? So I think he's talking about like, first of all, players are going to leave Notre Dame. They have to. They have 90 players on scholarship right now, and that's too many. So they will have defections from the roster. If you're looking at someone who would just be like, what? Like shocking. I haven't heard anything about that. So that's kind of where it is. There's not a ton of candidates for it, right? There are some. I think obviously Angeli is one to monitor, right? Who knows where his head is at in terms of this. I mean, Kenny Minchie is a candidate as well, right? Since he's early, but I've not heard anything about that. So I'm naming names for the sake of people who like kind of fit the profile. So I don't know. Anything on this, Jamie?
Well, I just think look at it. I wouldn't even say it's like well, I don't know. So multiple national quarters hinting that the it's going to be like crazy during the spring. I guess that would suggest there's going to be like some Jordan Addison types. Like, you know what I mean? Like
something
that kind
like
of
that. Yeah.
Like that there you're going to see kind of that. And I mean that could be, but it's like I mean when that Addison thing happened, that was huge. It was massive,
It
and
was also widely rumored too.
it
I
was
mean, there
widely
was
rumored,
awareness
but it
from
was
all.
like, but I just mean in terms of like a guy who won the Bolitnikov,
Yeah,
and then it's just like, well, he's gone, and then it's just like,
yeah,
oh yeah, he's going to USC, right? Like, so there's already was like a lot of big name guys who went in and shifted, but like, I mean, I think if okay, here's Alabama, everything's hunky dory right now. Like, they're getting what's his face back, obviously.
mhm.
Uh,
Caden
the
Proctor.
Aiden Proctor, the offensive tackle, who went to for a cup of coffee back in Iowa. But like, so that's great. But with all these like kind of new coaches and new spots, it just people go there and then it's like, I don't like this coach. I don't like how I was being used here. I don't like this. That sparks movement. And it's not just NIL. That's just like people just being unhappy or being uncertain about where things stand for them. So, and also too, like, I just think that there's, especially because it's more of a free for all in terms of like, there is really no one time transfer anymore. Guys can just go. So I think you're going to see some of these guys kind of like what happened with Caleb Smith last year, where you're like, it didn't work out for him and then he was
Mhm.
just gone. But I think you're going to see like, so Texas A&M, they got two guys in the portal, from like one guy from Troy, another guy from Louisiana Tech, who were like big time players in for at their schools, put up big numbers. They're wide receiver ones there. So what if those guys go there and they're just like, one of them could be fantastic, maybe the other guy's not. Well, the other guy who's not, I think that guy just bolts, like that's just what's going to happen now, right? And you kind of saw it a little bit last year. Like there's Penn State had a couple guys, DBs last year that just left. They were like supposedly going to be big pickups for them, and they just left. And then they, one guy went to Louisville, another guy went somewhere else. Like that's just, it's going to happen. There's going to be movement. I think people kind of forget that last year, it was a pretty big deal at Notre Dame when like Buckner gone, right?
Yeah,
Lorenzo Styles gone, Prince Collie gone, right? Like that all happened. And Logan Diggs gone, right? Like, and you can say out of that group, like Diggs was probably the only guy that was like, well, for sure he's got it. Kind of like he's gonna play and help the team, and whatever, no matter what. But still, like those guys were all like big recruits, guys that you could still see helping the team, you know, still possibilities for them to kind of, move up and do some things. And then it obviously didn't happen. And
right.
so I would just say too, like, look, there's competition at all these spots, right? So it's like, I'm looking like there's competition at linebacker, right? And I'm not saying anyone's going to transfer. I'm just saying there's competition there. And if some guy thinks I'm better than this guy, but I'm not with the ones, and they can't kind of explain to him like, no, it's still a competition or whatever, then that guy might leave, right? That's just a reality, right? Like, and someone who's could be a good player and could help out Notre Dame, that person could leave. It won't. There'll be at least one of those guys that somewhere, not at linebacker, but just in general on the roster that you know see something. It's like, you know, I'm out. It'd just be like Tobias Merriweather getting out earlier
Yeah.
than he did, right? So it's just you just never know, and that's just kind of part of the game. But then we also never know if like I'm sure that Notre Dame, if a really good offensive tackle who was a fit, I'm sure they take him in the portal, like, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about some other positions right now that are
I mean,
kind of going
left
to be
tackle, like
obvious.
so, left tackle, like Rajon is asking about Notre Dame being buyers. Abe Froman, Sausage King of Chicago, is asking, like a no-brainer left tackle, like you said. To me, they'd have to be so good
Yeah, it's
because
got to be a
I,
no brainer.
to have missed the spring, they'd have to be great. Like they'd have to be a very, very good player. and just the likelihood of that just isn't very good.
Yeah.
Just isn't. I think guys like the two running backs. Some school will offer them X amount of money. We're going to give you 225 carries. Like, would they want to do that? I have no idea. Right. I have no idea. Right. And I don't know how Notre Dame would react to that. I wouldn't be shocked if someone just is offering that. Why wouldn't you? They're good and they're sharing time. Right. So I have no clue. So I have not heard, again, I've not heard anything about that. I'm not hinting at anything at all. 0%. I'm just saying, like, that's the type of situation that is happening all over the country, and it will happen at Notre Dame as well.
There's that, and there's also like someone's got a new position coach, and it's like, you know what? And they were like, okay, I'm cool with it. And then they go through spring, and then they're not cool with it. Yeah. It's like that can happen. And then all of a sudden, someone who's there, they could want out. And like, look at, there's been still coaching carousel stuff that has happened as recently as like a couple weeks ago of just like assistants and stuff moving. So I think it's pretty much done now, whatever that part, but I'm just talking about like, if all of a sudden you were like starting spring ball and then all of a sudden, your coach is gone and you got a new coach, it's like, well, you start questioning things, right? So there's just a lot of possibilities that could happen. But I would just say like, so, the Sausage King also mentioned, the Stanford tenure and, Benjamin Yurcik, who's a good player, was a very good player. But I just don't think that guy made sense for Notre Dame because it's like, okay, well, you have Mitchell Evans coming back, and is this guy better than Mitchell Evans? No, I don't think so. So it's like, would he play at Notre Dame and be good? Yeah, for sure. But it's not like a no-brainer that he's going to step in and play right away. It's also not a no-brainer for him that Eli Raridon won't be better than him, or Flanagan might not be better. Like, that's just the reality of Notre Dame and the tight ends at Notre Dame, right? So I think there's a lot of those kind of situations. It's just like, you could say like, oh man, Notre Dame really should, like, if there was a safety that came up, you're like, okay, man, they should really get a safety. But it's also like, well, they got Watts and then they got Hurd. They picked up Hurd and they think that he's going to be a guy, obviously, he's not practicing yet because he's not going to practice this summer. And then you like what you have and say like Schuler or whatever. It's like, well, it'd probably have to be a guy that would be like a long-term guy and not like a short-term guy. So there's all these other things that go along with it. I don't even know. I think it's just like, it's kind of like a case-by-case basis of who popped up and, whether or not they would be a buyer and be interested. I know that like they would have definitely been interested in Caden Proctor if he was like, I want to come to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure they would have, right? But like, just like they would have been interested in Caleb Downs, right? If he was, interested in Notre Dame. But it's just, it's got to be the right thing. I just wonder, like, it's just funny because I'm now watching, like, I'm sure you've monitored it too, Greg, that all these people, these basketball players who are in the portal right now, which is so weird to do it during March Madness while they're doing it. It's like such a, God, come on, NCAA, like, just so stupid. But like, I don't follow college basketball. Like, I'm not a junkie enough to kind of know that, like, the guy who just went in from Wisconsin, like, this guy's supposedly like, oh man, this is a big deal that he went in. But I just see everyone saying like, well, now this guy is the top guy in the market or whatever, right? And it's just, and it can just change like that. It can change like that. Just like how nobody was like Caleb Downs. Like, it can just change like that. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I also think like Ohio State, that is another spot where, yes, all these guys are getting paid a lot. They're getting paid a lot now, whatever. They're taking care of their guys. They're trying to win a natty, all this kind of stuff too. But it's a lot of talent, and guys want to be top picks and they don't want to share. Just kind of like how, Quinshon Judkins, he was looking for the best spot. who's to say that there might not be a guy in Ohio State that just says like, you know what, I kind of want to go to some other place because that's just going to be where I can just not be a part. I want to be the guy. Like that can happen, right?
Yeah.
So, to me, it's all like good and fun, right? Like that is good and fun. And if those guys, if something like that happens, as long as it doesn't like, that's just one of those things you don't want them to be like, oh well, Texas A&M just picked up an All-American wide receiver or something. You're like, well, that sucks for Notre Dame, but like,
You don't want that.
no. But I mean, outside of that, I mean, you obviously don't want to see like SC pick up a bunch of people or whatever, but like, I mean, that's just like I mean, you just never know. It could happen, obviously, right? And it seems like SC, they got the checkbooks again, so they're trying to buy it.
Yep, they've got things figured out, as Lincoln Riley said the other day. Xer ND 1994. What will make a successful spring given various players hurt and others coming in the summer?
I mean, I just think it's like it's always about development, right? It's about development and understanding what you have and what you don't have on your team. And obviously some of it you're not going to know about because of the injuries. But there's not enough, like I would say, because I mean, you know about Benjamin Morrison, you know about Mitchell Evans, and even if you don't know how like Riley Leonard, if he's like for sure, like no doubt he's way better than these other guys and whatever. Even if you don't know that, you know that what the player he was at Duke at least. You have that, right? So, as of right now, those injuries, which are bigger injuries with guys out for the spring, like that's not as crippling as like not being like, oh, just say if like X Watts was to get hurt last year, that would have been like, okay, well, we're not even sure if X Watts is going to be like the guy that he's supposed to be yet. So you're still kind of wondering. So to me, it's all about development. It's about the Schulers, it's about the Boubacar Traorés. It's about Josh Burnham. It's about Drake Bowen, Jalen Snead, Jaden Osbury. It's about all these offensive line guys that we've talked about. It's about where are these guys at going into it, because if you come out of spring and you're like, oh, Billy Schrauth is like, he wasn't ready last year, but he is good to go now. It gives you a different level of confidence going into the summer.
Yeah, I think solidifying the offensive line is a big one. Just who it is, because I think that's their goal, right? I do think they want to do that. I think they want to solidify the offensive line. So that's a big part of it, right? And getting, like you said, getting consistent play from some of them, right? Like if Jagusaw is showing flashes, like he's putting together like a bunch of good practices, maybe has some rough moments, but on the main he's doing well. Like that's a big deal. Getting Tosh Baker, like getting him just a consistency standpoint, consistent good play, maybe not great, but like good. I think at this point it's just, I think for like a quarterback, I think it's developing. It's a quarterback. I think it's just developing Minchie and Carr at this point, like getting them up to speed. Because now Angeli, like you kind of know what you have there. You don't know, but you can't do that in the spring, right? So it's getting them ready to.
The floor is like pretty high with
right.
Yeah.
So you want to get Minchie kind of to that floor, basically. Get Carr up to speed. Maybe you're not going to get to his true floor, but getting there is a big deal. I think for the wide receivers, it's just getting them all acclimated to the offense. I think solidifying what they have in Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams, right? Like knowing what they have there. Can they come into a game and help you, right? Defensively, obviously, linebacker, that's huge, right? Like that's just the biggest thing. What do you have there? Who are going to be our big rotation guys? Getting Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray, right? Like that's a big deal. Getting them through it healthy, getting them playing at a higher level, especially Jaden Mickey. He has a higher level in there. He needs to reach it. And then the safeties we've talked about a bunch, like a Don Schuler. Who's going to be the third guy? Because I think you're confident in Xavier Watts. You're confident in Ron Hurd that they're going to at least play. Who's the third guy? Who's going to get out there? I think those are big questions. Blayberg's asking the faster linebacker between KVA or Drake Bowen. It's a good question. I don't know. They're both pretty. They're both good athletes. If I had to guess, I would probably say Drake Bowen. But
I'd probably say Bowen too.
I think short area, they're both very similar. It is what you
Yeah.
want. There's an explosiveness. This is our last question. JND, what are 5 or 6 key attributes you look for in quarterbacks? Arm strength, accuracy, running ability, vision. Rank the 3 quarterbacks that Notre Dame is chasing in each of these attributes. I think this is for the 2026 class.
Oh, yeah, the 2026 guys.
Yeah.
I would say that, 5 or 6, that's a lot of attributes, right?
Well,
Like,
it's on the film, it's hard to judge this stuff. What are just the first couple things that you're looking for?
Accuracy, definitely. Like, you want to see, and I'm not even talking about, like, you can look at the stats and say, I'm not saying it doesn't matter if some guy completes 70% and the other guy completes, 55%. Yeah, it does matter. But when you see someone put it on, guys, like, you're like, oh, he hits that guy in stride, or like that ball needed to be low and away, and that was the only spot he could put it, and that's where he put it. Like, that kind of stuff, definitely. So accuracy in terms of like ball placement, that's big. Like, pocket presence. So how comfortable they are against the rush, like movement within the pocket, being able to step up, being able to slide, being able to escape the rush, create, improvise. So like that's kind of goes hand in hand with running ability, right? Because I don't like guys who are just like strict pocket guys, because there's just, how many guys are Tom Brady? Everybody, I know, of course anyone would take Tom Brady, but it's like, well, there's only been one Tom Brady, who's basically, not a runner at all, but he could navigate, and he had just unbelievable awareness and ability to move and shift and avoid in the pocket, that, an understanding of his protections and all that kind of stuff. So that's really hard to see with some of these guys too, because so much of it, especially if you don't get to watch games and you only see highlights, like, that's very tough to see, because a lot of times it's like, man, this pocket is, squeaky clean. Like, there's just no one even getting a sniff of it close to this guy. So I think that's something that, I would say, like, how they handle, and that, like, kind of how they handle adversity within a play. I think that is something there. Like, yeah, arm talent, it matters for sure, but like touch, because if someone's always throwing fastballs, that's not good either, right? So it's just like, you want to see touch when it's required, right? How they throw the deep ball, all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't. It's tough to kind of rank all these things too, because one guy might be elite at something and another guy might just be like good at something else. So you have to kind of just judge. So you can't just say like accuracy is the most important if one guy's just like elite accuracy and the other guy's good, but the other guy does all these other things so much better, right? It's you have to weigh all of those things. I would say out of the 2026 guys, and I don't know if you've watched all of them yet, Greg, or the 3 guys that he's talking about, Grubbs, Hart, and Troy Hume, right? Noah Grubbs, Brady Hart, and Troy Hume.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 kind of like quote unquote top guys for Notre Dame right now. I would say, Grubbs is the big armed pocket guy. Certainly he makes, probably, if you'd say like the most impressive throws in like terms of like this guy's fitting it in a tight window and this is really like ripping it. He's kind of the most impressive there, and he's the biggest guy. He's like 225 pounds. Like, he's a big guy. 6'4", 220. Like, he's a big dude, but he's not a runner. He's not a runner, and you see an awful lot of clean pockets with him, just in terms of what you see for the most part. So it's like, I'm always wary of that, right? And Hune is a good athlete, pretty mobile, can run, not really like a dual threat. None of these guys are true dual threats. None of them are deuce knights, that's for sure. But like, they're, Hune is great touch, throws with good anticipation. Just another guy who's like good size, like really good size. I mean, they all have good height and all that too. There's nothing to worry about there. But he's, big hands, a guy who can really like not rip it when he need, not like totally rip it, but above average arm. And there's a lot of things like about him in terms of like his just balance, and it is just mechanically, he's very sound. And just, and then I would say that Hart is the guy that I like the most, because I think he's kind of like the best combination of all those guys in terms of like, he might not have the same level of arm talent as Grubbs, but you can see him really like fit it like into tight windows because of anticipation. And also you see him go like Grubbs, a lot of one read stuff. I mean, Hart, you see him go through progressions, look off safeties, and when he's going to a second progression, it's like his mechanics don't go to crap, like some of these other guys. Like he's very sound that way. He's also can escape. He can run. He's not like a true dual threat, but he's a lot like Angeli in terms of like, he can, if you want him to get a first down, he can get you a first down, right? Like, and he's the skinniest of them all. But I wouldn't worry about him kind of adding the weight eventually. I also too, I think he's just the best athlete. And I think too, just like maybe before you wouldn't value the athlete part of it as much, but I just think that's just so important now. Like, especially
now that Denbrock's around.
Yeah, but even just in general, I just think like, name me the last like true like, look at the quarterbacks that are in this draft right now that are like going to be the first round picks, the top guys, right? Who's like the one that is like the least athletic of the group? Like,
probably Penix.
Mike Penix, and he's a freak athlete. The guy ran a 4.55 today, right? Like, he's a good athlete, right? So they're all good athletes. And it's kind of a prerequisite now. You have to be able to run. You have to be able to move. You have to be able to escape, and if you can't do that, you're kind of dead in the NFL and in college, like, unless you're just so good at everything else. So, and that's why I would lean Hart, because I just think he's the best athlete out of them all. And it's just for me, out of that group, I like him the most.
Yeah, I'm always looking for, like you said, finding, being able to place the ball under pressure, making quick decisions, when it's dirty. Like, anyone can stand back there and scan, right? But like, what do you do when the clock is ticking? What do you do when you have to get the ball out under 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And this was something that I was super impressed by with CJ Carr. We got some full game film of him against like a defense that was just bearing down on him constantly. They could not block them at all. He had no time, and they had to get the ball out, and he had to make a decision quickly. And he continually made the correct decision, and B, the ball was exactly where it was supposed to be. It's like time after time after time. This is a playoff game. They ended up losing, but they put up like 42 points. Like, he had a great game when he had to have it. And so when, like, man, you show me that trait, like, that is, for me, that's the one, right? And obviously you want to have like all of the arm strength stuff, and accuracy is always important, right? But like being able to process and being able to make quick decisions, kind of under pressure, like, to me, that's the biggest thing. And that's what I'm looking for out of everybody. So, and you would know best about those quarterbacks. I I try to stay within the recruiting class that Notre Dame's in. Just going off into 2026, it's just like that's hard for me to do. Like Jamie's much better.
It's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, they've already offered over 100 guys in 2026. I can be honest. I haven't watched the majority of them. Right? Like I still got to put out a Fab 50 for the 2025 class because I still haven't watched several of the top guys in 2025.
But with Rajon says it's good to hear about Carr. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of like a big debate in the industry about like, is he on 3 had a really low grade on him or low rating on him. As soon as I saw that game, I was like, you know what, I'm good because I knew all the other stuff. I knew he had all the other attributes, but when I saw him perform like that under pressure, I was like, I'm sold. I don't really need to say anything else. So that's where I came out with that. All right, that'll do it for the questions. That'll do it for our mailbag show. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If this is your first time catching us, please hit the like. Please subscribe to this channel. Please hit the notification bell, so whatever it is. We are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. Notre Dame women's basketball, Sweet 16 tomorrow, 2:30 Eastern time. So you're going to want to check that out and check out the tournament this weekend as well. We'll be back next week with more content talking Notre Dame spring. So have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.